rise. It is 7 o'clock. We'll call the City Council Caucus meeting to order for July 15th. We have one item on the agenda for discussion. We have House Bill 160, zoning regulations for manufactured houses. Do you want to introduce Andy?
Well, you go ahead.
Okay, Andy is here from PDS. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Sure.
If you could just hit the little button. There you go.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mayor, City Council, and Mr. Glenn for having me this evening. As the Mayor mentioned, I'm here to talk about some recent state legislation that was passed that's ultimately going to have an impact on your zoning regulations. So, Mr. Glenn, if you don't mind pulling up my presentation so we can go through it. And if you don't mind going to the next slide, thank you. So the legislation was House Bill 160, and it's related, an act related to qualified manufactured home, and we'll get into a little bit about what that means, because that's a very specific term that defines a very specific type of house. But just for some little background, it was signed in April. Importantly, the effective date isn't going to be until July of 2026. So while changes are necessary, we're not yet to the point where we're absolutely under the gun where changes need to be made. Mr. Glenn, if you don't mind forwarding to the next slide. So like I said, a qualified manufactured home, and that term's going to be important, having that qualified there, because that's a very specific definition. So the definition there is for you to read, but it's easier for me to kind of explain what it's not. So a qualified manufactured home is not a mobile home, and not a double wide. It is basically a stick-built home, but rather than being built on the site, it's built in a warehouse or a factory somewhere, and then it's brought in on a truck or several trucks and then put together on the site. So we're not talking about anything that's on wheels or mobile or anything like that. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. So there's a lot of details in House Bill 160, but essentially it kind of boils down to these couple of points. The first point is that a city can't exclude a qualified manufactured home from any zone that allows for any other type of single-family residential. Also, a city cannot discriminate against qualified manufactured homes in terms of imposing additional application requirements, architectural requirements, things like that, that wouldn't also apply to a single-family home. It also imposes foundation requirements. As I said, these are not things that are brought in and stuck up on wheels, anything like that. They have to be put on a permanent foundation. And then, like I said, architectural compatibility standards. Basically, again, a city can't impose any additional requirements that wouldn't already be required for a single-family home. So, with all that being said, basically what the statute boils down to is that a qualified manufactured home can't be treated any differently than a single-family home. If you don't mind going to the next slide. And importantly, the act that was passed by the state legislator included that any zoning ordinance regulation requirement that violates this section is void or unenforceable. So that sounds pretty harsh. You know, when I asked our attorney about what that meant, he said that only that section that pertains to qualified manufactured home is unenforceable, not that your entire zoning ordinance would be unenforceable. So that's the best advice that I've got right now. Certainly we plan to have something and solutions in place before we even get close to seeing what that means, hopefully, here in Northern Kentucky. Next slide, please. So currently, I was just talking to Mr. Glenn before the meeting, but I think, honestly, the city of Erlanger is in a pretty good spot in terms of these regulations. So again, this is current regulations. the city already allows qualified manufactured homes basically anywhere that a single-family home is allowed. So as we're looking at changes to your zoning ordinance, we really don't have to muck around with the permitted use table. They're already allowed. Where changes may occur, Mr. Glenn, if you don't mind, the next slide, is the additional standards then that we're talking about. So currently, the zoning ordinance requires all of these compatibility standards in terms of like assessed value, and you see how it goes into like the floor living space and the siding and exterior materials and roof pitches and things like that. Those are all things that we're going to have to look at closely because, again, those are additional requirements above and beyond right now that would be required for a single-family home. So while we're still investigating this, or at least our initial thought is, we're going to have to at least make changes or even eliminate some of these things here in order to make the zoning ordinance compliant with the state statute. Next slide, please. So the PDS sent out a memo a couple weeks ago saying that, we're aware of this. It's being talked about not only in Erlanger, but some of the other cities in Kenton County, and we're going to be working on a solution. We feel like since this is one of those issues that, well, it certainly affects like almost everybody that has zoning, but certainly every city across Kenton County, that this is something that the Kenton County Planning Commission and PDS is really positioned to sort of take the lead on and work on this and then propose a change, county-wide across all the ordinances and certainly to the Erlanger ordinances. Feel like this will be the most efficient, it'll keep everybody on the right track, and it'll also save the city some time and money because you don't have to go to the Planning Commission or pay that application fee. And certainly on our end, we don't want to be reviewing 20 identical text amendment applications too. So this is just a rough outline of the process that we're looking at, and I honestly hope that some of this will go a little bit faster, but just to keep things kind of organized, I space things out by monthly timeframes. But we're currently in phase one. We're looking at this, and we're starting to get a handle on what needs to happen, and we're actually already starting to work on some draft amendments. At least kind of putting together some options that we might be able to consider. Certainly, we're not going to just put something together and put it on your table and expect you to adopt it. We're going to work closely with your staff, with your city attorney, and with your mayor to make sure that kind of collectively we're moving in the right direction that people want to see us. And then within that time frame, of course, we're going to do make sure everything we're doing is actually solving the problem that we're trying to address. Do any outreach that we might need to do, and then in February have the Planning Commission, authorized to the Planning Commission in February, have the hearing in February or March, and then that gives all of the jurisdictions several months to take final action on the text amendments. As I said, the deadline for this is June 1st, 2026. I would say that this is sort of like a very conservative time frame. I certainly think some of these things can happen concurrently and this whole thing can be sped up a little bit, but I just want to make sure that we're accounting for each step along the way to make sure we don't miss anything. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, I think that wraps it up. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you. Yes.
As far as the foundations, you said it needs a foundation, or I'm assuming the standard foundations are slab, crawl space, or basement. Are there any others that I'm missing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There is a specific definition for what a permanent foundation is. Now, I'm not the building guy that knows the technical details of what constitutes or what different types of foundations there are. So I appreciate that question. I don't have like a direct answer for that.
But what you were saying is it does meet the same regulations that we have now for any typical stick-built type home. So,
right.
So the same regulations that we have currently would marry up with this new regulation.
Yes.
Peter, maybe you can answer the question. So could someone I guess I'm thinking of like blocks. Are concrete blocks or cement blocks considered a permanent foundation? They're not to me, but I don't know the technical definition.
And I think that would probably go back to Andy.
Yeah, I'll
but-
look into that, and I'll actually confer with our building official to get a definitive answer for you.
Yeah, because like a block, so what you're saying is like a block crawl space foundation that you might typically see on a manufactured home, is that going to be permittable? That'd probably be good clarification to get.
Right.
I mean, Andy, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my interpretation of the law change, and we're not really going to see it for another year or so when we see it in practice, is that cities really cannot discriminate against manufactured housing so long as that manufacturing housing meets whatever the residential standards are for that zone.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's correct.
So we still, as a city, can impose whatever requirements we have on residential. We just cannot say no manufactured housing, as long as that manufactured housing meets our brick facade, meets all the other pitch roof, all the other requirements that we might have in that zone.
Exactly. Thank you.
So I'm going to echo what you said, Andy. I'm not sure in Erlanger, since we already had it as a permitted structure, I'm not sure it is going to have a huge practical impact on us. I think I see it probably as more tweaking
Yep.
of our zoning code than some cities which have just been banning them outright.
Yeah, I think that's a great assessment, and I would agree with that. Yeah, I think some cities are going to have, I think, much more drastic changes. Like you said, this is more just tweaking to make sure we avoid any issues down the road.
Speak real quick about HOA regulations and how that would affect this manufactured housing.
Sure. So especially in a lot of your newer subdivisions, in addition to whatever like the zoning requires, there are also restrictive covenants and deed restrictions. So those restrictive covenants and deed restrictions go above and beyond the zoning requirements. So for instance, the zoning may say fences are allowed in the front yard, but if your HOA does not allow fences in the front yard, then you're going to have to meet those requirements. And so the point of that being is that even if a qualified manufactured home, say, is allowed in whatever residential zone, if it's in, and I would say as an example, one of your newer subdivisions, there could be additional restrictive covenants that are already in place that would limit or even prohibit those types of homes from going in. So this only just affects the zoning regulations, the requirements of HOAs are not going to go away, and if there's anything there that's beyond the zoning requirements, those would be enforceable. Of course, those are enforceable by the HOA, not by the city, so they would certainly have to go through their board, and if there's an issue, handle that themselves.
Okay, Andy, appreciate it. And we look forward to more to come on this in the months to come.
Yes, and I will follow up on that question
Yeah,
with an
that'd be
email to you,
great.
Peter, and then, yeah.
Yep, all right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Yes.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I know this isn't on the agenda, but I would like to request that we call a meeting of the Small Business Task Force. Not right now, obviously, but whenever it makes sense.
Yeah, we've already discussed having it before the caucus meeting in August. So,
Okay, great.
thank you.
I have something I'd like to add to the agenda, an idea for a tax incentive for development, and it would apply to both residential zones as well as commercial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Good.
I also have something to add. And I know we just did the ethics on needs to be reported. And as most of you are aware, my son recently passed away. And there was a huge outreach, and we received a ton of gifts of flowers and food. We had an anonymous donor that paid for the entire funeral, including the urn. I'm sure could try and make a list of everything that was donated, but I would not be able to even name most of the people. So however you want me to handle that.
I
I'm
think
more
you've
than happy to do
adequately
that.
handled it right here, as long as council's comfortable with that. Yeah, I think you did it.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you for everybody who came or donated. It meant a lot.
All right, any other items? Okay, do I make a motion that we adjourn? Ms. Nicely, Mr. Farmer, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, motion carried. Have a good evening.